Okay, regarding the situation in Libya and beyond. So basically, here's my take on the situation, in case any of you are interested in my opinion. I'm going to read some notes, which will probably help me focus a little bit on this issue. Basically, the entire band of neocons are guilty and responsible precisely for having illegally and wantonly trashed the second independent secular nation in the Middle East after Iraq. Gaddafi, with whom the United States collaborated even to the extent of kidnapping and returning Gaddafi's dissidents to Libya to be tortured, only became the villain after his declaration that oil was no longer to be traded in petrodollars, but rather in euros and gold. So the fact that he was a socialist with a visionary project for a pan-African nation didn't fit into Washington's hegemonic vision of controlling resources and expanding empire under the meaningless but corporate trademark democracy. Thus, the empire decided that it was the imperative of the day to depose Gaddafi, with the project being managed locally by none other than Mr. Chris Stevens, the ambassador who just lost his life, who worked for the Department of State, in the quest to establish a distinctly more cooperative pro-USA client regime, or so they thought. Now, I'm actually reading this from a commentary made by somebody else on some website, and this guy, I don't know, he writes under some synonym, and basically, I think he seems to be a rather disgruntled Republican of some kind, or used to be a Republican, it seems like, by some of the other comments he's made. But I feel in this case he is precisely correct, because the neocons are not. The neocons have huge influence over U.S. foreign policy, even under the Obama regime. Make no mistake. They're everywhere as far as the neoliberal economic policies being pushed across the globe. Okay, so this is what this guy fails to see, perhaps. But let me go on. Basically, this whole jihadist insurgency in Libya has come only as a direct result of U.S.-led NATO missions there, which were originally designed to basically oust Gaddafi and his regime, but which inadvertently ended up leaving a very dangerous and uncontrolled power vacuum within that particular country. Quite obviously, some of the same rebel militias, including a substantial number of foreigners, led by the CIA, and now, essentially, and now many of them in Syria on the identical mission, okay, who assisted in ousting Gaddafi, have now reclaimed basically not full control, but yes, they have reclaimed sort of their independence, and they decided now to turn their weapons against Washington and their strategic interests in the region. And basically, you know, that involves some pan-Arabic cooperation, pan-African cooperation, and all that. So this is essentially precisely what happened in Iraq. There was no Al-Qaeda in Iraq before we showed up there, you know, and this is just, we're just pushing the repeat button here. This is what's happening. And as far as particularly the situation in Libya is concerned, this, I believe, is it may be coupled with this inflammatory and totally moronic film, basically insulting all people of the Islamic faith, not just jihadists, by the way. Of course, they'll come out, and but it has more to do with this entire U.S. global strategic imperative of total hegemony over resources in the Middle East. Now, Chris Stevens, and, personally, I don't know the guy, I don't know what he did prior to this or whatever, but essentially what we have here is Mr. Stevens was part and parcel and acted as a direct liaison with the CIA in basically the plot to overthrow the previous Libyan regime. So the moral lesson is that you reap exactly what you sow. The United States illegally initiated a vicious and murderous bombing campaign against an independent Libya in order to facilitate miscellaneous extremist factions to effectively overthrow that government. And leaving the country now in ruins, thoroughly trashed, and in essence a failed state. So the unfortunate and untimely death of Mr. Stevens and the other U.S. consulate workers, as well as the Libyan people or soldiers who were defending that compound, is a direct result of that policy. And, here we had, just a few months back, Mrs. Clinton gleefully quipping, "We came, we saw, and he died." Yeah, well, guess what? Blowback is a bitch. And I'm afraid, we're going to just see more of the same, no matter who gets selected into office come November. So yeah, that's my assessment of the situation in Libya. Now, the situation that's now developing in the larger Middle East, the massive protests against Americans and Western interests these don't just spring up out of nowhere. And I'm sure the video has been used or is being used to even further inflame that situation there. And I do believe that these people who made this video are idiots and hate mongers, and they're no better than anybody else who spurns on hatred around the globe, But this anti-Americanism it has backgrounds, This didn't just spring up out of nowhere. So yes, our U.S. foreign policy, is completely screwed up, and this didn't just happen under Obama, as this commenter here, who partially, I'm reading his comments. It didn't just happen under Obama. This has a very long history, very long history. Essentially, it's been messed up ever since World War II, and possibly even before that. So it is just, an entire mess of our own creation. And unfortunately, ordinary people ordinary people in the Middle East are going to pay the price for all this. And eventually, the chickens are going to come home to roost here. Because it's just inevitable, you know. You can only act as a bully, even under a government you hate, for so long. So yeah, that's my commentary regarding that situation.